Hello and welcome to the Crafty Pint podcast. I'm Will.
I'm James, and it's been a pretty sobering week
Yeah,
at the world of beer, unfortunately. I guess, the roller coaster that's been there for the last few years continues to have its ups and downs, and this week's been a bit of a downer, I think, for many people in the beer industry. Starting off with the news on Monday with Molly Rose Brewing.
yeah. Just gone into liquidation rather than a voluntary administration or anything like that. They've closed their doors immediately.
Mhm.
If you read the story, which will be linked in the show notes, obviously Nick is hoping there's a sort of possibility of saving it,
Yeah.
but it's something we've just got to wait and see, I think.
Yeah, no, and I guess full disclosure, I'm a good friend of Nick Sandry, the Molly Rose founder. I've known him since the early days of the brewery. Probably met him before he started on that mission. Our sort of families have hung out together, so really wishing him and his family and all the awesome team there well. But yeah, I mean the noises coming from the brewery are that they hope to have a plan to bring it back. But I think we'll wait and see what happens on that front. Obviously, it's a sign of just how challenging things remain out there. I think what's been notable to me is that I know this is, every case is slightly different, but it's not
Yeah,
a VA. We got to the point over the last year or so, whenever we put out a story about someone going to voluntary administration as opposed to liquidation, there'd be, let's just say, a broad gamut of responses, including some people going, "Oh, this has just been done to, wipe out debt, blah blah blah." In this case, everything I've seen has been 100%, just people gutted and
yeah,
very supportive, which I think is testament to what Molly Rose and, what Nick and the team have attempted to do over the years. They've been looking to elevate the way that beer is perceived, the way, beer and food pairing, not just with beer. They've done some amazing community focused events. They've done some very different events. They presented themselves in a way that isn't sort of traditional for beer, which I think has been important to try and bring new people in, which they have done. And I guess, who knows, the full in the workings of the business. I know they've made some changes over the last year or so trying to find a way through. But I guess, heavy investment in that amazing, new bar and restaurant next to the old brew pub at a time when costs have been going up, and
very high level quality of food as well.
yeah,
Really, it's a premium offering across the board. Anyone who's been there will know
yeah,
that. And in this at this moment
yeah.
in time, cost of living crisis, I think people might still be going to some high end restaurants, but potentially not ones that are in a brewery
I
or
think
yeah.
so. Yeah, I think at the very upper end of society, people are still living the life of Riley, but
There's a
then the
lot of
ones that,
Teslas on the road.
yeah,
I notice, and that's wrong for a number of reasons.
yeah, no, exactly, no. But I think people are probably going to be going to restaurants, but dropping $500 on a bottle of wine as opposed to going, "Oh, let's go and check out this brewery trying to do some really high end." So, yeah, it seems very unfortunate. Maybe there'll be some good news in the next week or two. It's obviously a high risk strategy going down this route. But yeah, wishing them all well. We've done some great events and we've made some beer with them over the years. So we'll see what transpires there. And another one from another part of the country, which I'm sure has left many people pretty sad. And there's been, I guess, some more sort of cryptic posting around this for the last week or two as to what's happened. But you spoke to Smokey earlier today.
Yeah, so Currumbin Valley Brewing's closed. It sort of temporarily shut last week. The doors shut. They were hoping to be able to sell the business. There was a sale being discussed,
Mm.
and that's now fallen through. So it's moved into the permanently closed category
Yeah.
of breweries, or the doors don't look like they'll open again. Yeah, I spoke to Smokey recently. He's obviously gutted, but put a lot into that brewery. Again, there just wasn't enough money to sustain it.
Yeah.
They were looking at a whole range of options. They've had it sort of on the market for some time or working with a broker, but nothing's come through, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think they've been hit by all manner of, I guess, unpredictable things. Where Smokey's main brewery is up on the hillside. He's been hit by some pretty severe storms over
Yeah,
the years. He's lost power at on a few occasions. There's just been a number of external factors, and I think you can sort of take a number of these cases from recent years and look at it and go, well, a lot of these things may not have come to a head in the good times.
yeah,
Whether it was when there was money flowing through the economy and through the beer world, potentially it masked whether it was business challenges or whether it was you could ride out the storm.
yeah.
Forgive me for the
Eh,
pun. And I think maybe now that sort of that masking, that sort of that safety net isn't there, and that's why a lot of people are falling foul.
Yeah, I mean, talking to him, Smokey points out that not that long ago you'd walk into a bottle shop and there would be 6 fridges, 8 fridges of a lot of craft beer, and now you go into those same places and it's 2.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, which is
yeah,
probably partly down to a lot of people doing less limited releases, but
yeah,
coming back to the Molly Rose thing, it's also people going, I'm looking for something affordable, like a cheaper case of beer or whatever, if I want to have a drink, and yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So again, best wish to the team at Crummin. We've had some fun with them over the years. We've both been out to Smokey's farm
yeah,
at different times. So yeah, wishing them well. Which I guess puts even sort of great focus on a story that you ran on Monday. You spoke to Kylie, the CEO of the IBA, Independent Brewers Association, and Evan, the chair. I guess on the back of some of the stuff they presented at the High Country Hops
yes,
Symposium.
yes. So you may have noticed in your podcast feed as well, there was a special Tuesday episode. We recorded a number of chats during the High Country Hop, and we plan to put them out at certain times. But we put the IBA one out this week because it's very relevant to what they're trying to do right now. And yeah, we're in a election campaign right now. The promises for beer, there have been promises for beer, so in terms of taxation, so maybe that's something, but they're obviously not. They're not great. I mean, really, in terms of
shuffling the decks on
yeah,
the deck chairs on the Titanic kind of moves as to how it feels when there's much bigger, and you'd think more obvious sort of maybe harder work, more obvious things that could be done in terms, looking at the tax system, looking at
yeah,
market access, what have you.
yeah, which is hard to do. Governments don't really want to spend a lot of time reforming the tax base, I think, across a range of reasons. But you could look at it and be like, well, these are the promises made. It's not going any further. That might be true, but at the end of the day, we are in an election campaign at the moment. All the polls say it's going to be very tight. If you live in a marginal seat, I think you're going to get pretty harassed over the next 4 weeks by volunteers asking you to vote for their person. So I think it is a good time for people, if they love craft beer or they work in the industry, to try and reinforce that message, to try and get across, because
they're losing potentially important part of their community.
Yeah.
So it's something that matters to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And a number of politicians have already made commitments. So we'll see what happens, but I just think while the election's going on, there's a whole range of resources on the IBA's website, Campaign 2025, that you can draw on those and, share them, even if it's a simple message of why is beer so expensive, what's going on here. Get that conversation in front of politicians, because a lot of them really don't understand it as well. I think it's really important to get, like, they don't have a nuanced understanding of what's going on in the industry. Some people do, the industry does, so it's about getting that message across.
Yeah. We've got these breweries stepping in as the pubs before the pokies, as Daniel Venema said, in our Year in Beer Queensland chat last year. And if they're under threat, then you just be left with the pubs and the pokies. TAB, like, these are providing a valuable, I think, additional asset to a lot of communities. On that note, though, how excited are you about the fact it's going to be a very close election as a politics nerd?
Well, I love watching elections, and it's also Collingwood are playing that night as well. So I don't know, I'm going to have 2 screens up or something, or do I go to the game and have Anthony Green on my phone? We'll see.
Yeah. It's going to be a busy day. I'm running the Alphington Primary School fair bar as well, so it's going to be a full-on May the 3rd for us all.
Yes.
And I guess looking sort of forward and more positive as well. We ran a brief story last week about Pink Boot Society.
Yeah.
They've launched their search for more mentors and mentees to sort of work to, I guess, help improve the quality and the knowledge base within the industry.
Yeah, so they're working with Jane Lewis on this, who's helped found the Australian chapter of the Pink Boot Society, and runs Full Colour Life now, so and spends a lot of her energy on coaching people and those kind of things. So I think importantly is, if you've been in the industry for a long time and you feel like you've got something to give, they're really looking for mentors as well across all genders, and their mentees. It's talking to Joanna, who did it last year, she said, even if you're not sure, even if you think you're on the right path through your career, you're always going to get something out from it. So as well, we do a lot of sort of competitions and things, and sometimes it's frustratingly hard to get people to apply to anything. So if you're even thinking about applying and you're able to, definitely do so.
Yeah, well, and talking of competitions, they often relate to our beer club, the Crafty Cabal. We've got 2 events coming up next week for our beer club members. If you're in Queensland, I'm flying up next week and will be at Hiker in East Brisbane doing a bit of a cross-pollination of the Crafty Pint podcast and the Pour It Out podcast from the guys at Aussie Beer Voyage and Hiker Brewing. We've got brewer Becky Centino joining us, and also Ivy, the venue manager from Netherworld. Tickets are just $10, gets you your first beer free. Jump onto the Crafty Pint events diary to check that out. And if you're a Cabal member, you can get tickets through the Cabal and get some additional bonuses as well. And then the following day, you will be at Rocky Ridge in Brunswick.
Yes.
And they're doing a special pre-launch event for their new core range, Cali IPA, Cabal members only. Taste of the new IPA, guided tasting of a number of other fun beers they've got on at the minute, plus a 4-pack of the new IPA to take away. Again, jump on craftykabal.com to grab your tickets for that.
Great segue there, James, between competitions, Pink Boots, it all worked very well. And that brings us to this week's guest. I don't have a smart segue, unfortunately. I've been thinking about it. Yeah.
With hops, and they're releasing a Cali IPA, and we've now got an American hop professor coming up as our main guest. How about that?
I knew I should have let you do it. This is what years and years of journalism gets you. So this week's guest is Tom Shellhammer. It's one of our chats we had at CIBD conference recently. So it's Craig and I chatting to him. Tom is, he's a world expert in hops. Like he knows more about hop chemistry, I think I would say. Hopefully this doesn't offend any listeners than just about anyone. He's fittingly, for a professor who studies hops, he's from Oregon State University. He's the Nor'Wester Professor of Fermentation Science. I hope that's not a typo on their website, and Nor'Wester is a real thing. But Tom's been studying hops for a really long time. I first interviewed him in 2019 when he was actually also in Tasmania. I think he might have said he's only been to Tasmania in terms of Australian states, but he came over. Then the conversation was very much around hop creep. He was really talking about that a lot. And now a lot of his focus is on hop maturity and timing of picking. So, if you've had beers from the Hawkers, did an experimental series with this last year where they had early pick versus late pick hops. Range have been in this space. It's a really interesting part of brewing, where people are trying to see, what impact, say, Citra hops, which is one of Tom's focus, picked early versus picked late, have on each other. So it's a pretty technical chat. I think I managed to understand it though, which is reassuring. But yeah, so he's on a 4-month sabbatical down here. Well, not down here, sorry, in New Zealand. So he's a lot of people down under, I guess. And he's spending his time sort of understanding the industry there. It sounds like a great job being a professor. The fact that you can just take this leave to sort of study whatever you want in the work.
Well, that'll be up after the break. We'll also have the latest winner in our Have You Done a Rallings Good Beer Citizen campaign in the middle of that interview. And that has been a nice reaction to our last Bluestone East Brewery of the Month winner, the Social Brewers. So if you want to nominate your Brewery of the Month, anyone that you love out there for whatever they do, head to craftypint.com/bluestone, which just leaves us with you, Will.
Yeah, so enjoy the chat and don't forget to like, subscribe and review. Cheers.
Cheers.
All aboard! Get ready to travel the world of beer at 22 pubs, bars and breweries across Melbourne this May. Next stop, Pint of Origin Festival. Visit pintoforigin.com.
Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Now, I've heard you described as a hop doctor, hop chemist, hop scientist. Can you explain a little bit what you do?
What I do? Yeah, actually, there was some folks at Coors used to call me the brewgineer. or the beer-gineer. Yeah, because I used to teach, do a lot of training in brewing engineering. Yeah. So, a whole bunch of different names.
The beer-gineer.
The beer-gineer.
I love that.
That's a great t-shirt.
Exactly.
That's a good t-shirt.
Yeah. And then I had other students after an exam saying they'd been shell-hammered.
Yeah.
And then there was another one. Yeah, being shell-hammered is like being inebriated but still like the smartest guy in the room kind of thing. These are things I hear from like students later after they graduated. It's kind of hilarious. Yeah.
I'm gonna make that a verb that we use in Australia now as well. That's
okay.
That's very good. What are you doing later tonight? Yeah, I just got shell hammered.
Yeah,
too many IPAs.
Yeah, exactly.
But I still feel smart.
Yeah.
So I'm a professor at Oregon State University, and I work in a food science department. And so like at a research university like OSU, we've got three kind of main remits, which one is to like to educate people, another one is to carry out research, and another one is like to connect with the industry. It's sort of the teaching, research, and extension. These are the words that within the university we would call that. So from a teaching perspective, I teach students how to brew beer. I teach them about the science and technology of beer making. And it's really about training people to get in the industry. It's not like home brewing. It's like students that see themselves as having a career in either the craft industry or the big guys. And so that's been, like that's all the science and technology from a really fundamental level up to like applied. And then of course there's laboratory, like hands-on, how do you analyze raw materials in beer from a chemical, biochemical, microbiological, sensory, physical perspective? How do you evaluate beer? And then we do some continuing ed stuff, people that are in the industry. Done some work with, I did quite a bit of work with IBD. I'm here at a CIBD conference. So I was on their board of examiners for 17 years, like writing exams and marking exams for people in the industry. So that's kind of like the education part. Then on the research part, I study beer and I study hops, kind of made a name for myself in the hop area. I would say when I first came to OSU, it was really focused on how hops, like the interplay of brewing and hops. Did a lot of work on bitterness and understanding bitterness quality and how brewing affects bitterness. And then it kind of moved more into aromatics, like hop aroma. And I would say for the last 10 years, 8 to 10 years, I'm still doing that, but I'm starting to work my way upstream in terms of the whole supply chain, working closer with hop growers. We did work on hop kilning and hop maturity and hop terroir, things that at the grower level that have an impact on hop quality that ultimately manifest themselves in differences in beer quality. And the research is like blends chemistry, like analytical chemistry, deconstructing things chemically and measuring them, and sensory science. I really like sensory, I like statistics. And so it's kind of those three kind of come together, the chemistry, sensory, and stats. But I also have this background in engineering. So wasn't really trained as like an analytical chemist throughout school. I was trained more as a fermentation scientist, food scientist, and food engineer. And lately I've grown into becoming an analytical chemist. So that's kind of the lens I look at beer through, is like chemistry, sensory, those interactions. And I would say more and more like there's a biochemical element and now even like a microbiological element, doing a lot of work on yeast hop interactions, biotransformation. So becoming not a yeast expert, but certainly more cognizant of yeast and the interplay that yeast has with hops. So that's kind of the research part. And I'm training students to basically go out in the industry and be research leaders, heads of departments, if they got a graduate degree, or maybe even like junior professors. They start off as junior. We all start off as junior professors, but as professors. Yeah. And then there's the outreach part. So that's connecting with folks in the industry, doing service for the industry. So I was president of the ASBC for a while. I was president of the District Northwest. We talked briefly about the board of examiner stuff. With IBD, I was the chair of the international section of the IBD. So it's like being a leader in the brewing industry, helping provide like expertise and guidance to the industry it's like we call it a service level. But that service also is like the way to connect with folks in the industry. So being visible, being well connected. I mean, it's kind of a circular thing, right? The more I'm connected with the industry, the more I understand what the industrial problems are, and that feeds the research part. So I'm not just like at my desk, like, I wonder what interesting topic will be. So it's staying closely connected. Like we have a huge pile of hops sitting in inventory, and no one really knows like how do these hops age?
Yeah.
Right. So we can go look in the literature and look at like how like European hops or bitter hops age. Like the whole HSR thing is really about hop alpha acids and how those change, but there's very little on hop aroma. So we're doing work on trying to understand how American aroma hops age so that we can give guidance to brewers. Like they pull a bag out of inventory. Is it good? And trying to maybe challenge the concept that this kind of last in, first out inventory management, that's kind of challenging. Like if you're always wanting just the freshest hops, then what happens is your inventory just gets older and older and older and older. And so being able to manage the inventory appropriately and making like data-driven decisions as opposed to just emotional or well-intentioned but maybe misguided decisions. So that connection with industry then is like what is driving this project, understanding that hey, the industry needs some data or some guidance on how this huge inventory of hops is aging. At what point do you stop using hops, like old hops, or how deep can you go? So
yeah, because I mean, there's an option there, isn't there, to potentially send them to be made into a advanced hop product at a certain time as well. So
yeah, maybe it's like you kind of have all these decisions. Like when you have like let's say a 3-year-old hop, and you still got more hops coming in. Like the longer you hang on to it, it's the fact that there's like an environmental impact, right? It's being stored cold, so you're burning energy and money to just sit on it. And if there's no intention of using it, you need to like to make a decision, fish or cut bait kind of thing, and either just jettison it or, as you pointed out, maybe try to get some value out of it, extract it. The whole industry right now is kind of looking at what to do that and trying to not right size, but let's say rebalance demand and supply, because right now we definitely have an oversupply, and it's not good for the industry, right? It's like a whole, I would call it an ecosystem, but it's probably like, let's call it an economy. It needs to have adequate balance so that the growers are making money, they can stay in business, and the brewers can make money, they can stay in business. And just because you have a giant pile of hops, you can't just go to all the growers and say, you know what, I don't want any hops for 2 years. And when you come back 2 years later, you got no industry left behind. So it's an interesting challenge for the economists. But
yeah,
the research side of what you're doing is fascinating, and I think kudos for. I think America's really sort of leading the way in this sort of space, and just as another example of the kind of work that you're doing, I was lucky enough to attend the session you presented at the CIBD, which I think was probably one of the most specific focused research questions. You, as I understand it, you were looking at the impact of harvest timing on whether it's a late or an early harvest on the quality of Citra hops, as an example, and looking at different fields and dates and so forth. But how does something like that get started? Is it just a curious question in someone's mind?
There's
where does the impetus
pretty
come
interesting
from?
story to get to like that talk that I gave. I guess it was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So for about 5 years, we did work on hop kilning. So trying to understand how the temperature at which you kiln hops or dry hops impacts hop quality. And I would say almost all the research, most of the research was done at commercial scale rather than like little tiny pilot kilns. We wanted to do it at commercial scale because we wanted the results to be easily transferable and accepted, as opposed to distrusted and rejected by the hop industry. So we worked with hop growers. We got close relationships with them, and they let us in, like in the middle of harvest. We're doing these trials on like big kilns, many times half-size kilns, but the half-size kilns are still like 10 meters by 5 meters by 1 meter. That's it. There's like, I don't know, 10,000 pounds of wet hops.
That's a big pizza oven.
Exactly. Yeah. And we do like multiple reps. I mean, we go through, but to me, it looks like giant piles of hops. Of course, it's probably tiny in the whole production scale. So one of those growers that we worked with was Jason Peralt and Peralt Farms. And Jason Peralt, if you're not familiar or your audience isn't familiar, he's a pretty well-known guy in the hop industry. He's a multi-generational, son of a multi-generational hop farmer. He's also a breeder. So varieties like Mosaic, Citra, those are his babies. So
Yeah,
it's
wow.
pretty cool.
We're pretty familiar with those ones.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Yeah, it was really, I remember one time before a Hop Research Council meeting, we meet twice a year to kind of share data with the members. And being at a bar in Boise, Idaho, and had this beer on, this is many years ago, called Sam. And it stood for Simcoe, Amarillo, and Mosaic. And it was like, wow, I'm sitting having a beer with Jason, and like there's 2 of his hops are in this, and it's like
That's
this.
pretty cool.
Yeah. And essentially that beer ultimately, was made by 10 Barrel, was bought by AB. They couldn't call it Sam because Sam is like, Sam Adams Boston Lager, so they decided to call it Joe. But I like the Sam part because like the Simcoe Amarillo Mosaic thing. Anyway, so I'm doing this work at Jason's farm, and what we found is that we would do replicates on these on-farm trials, and there was clearly a temperature effect as we increased kilning temperature, drying time shortened, obvious. Interestingly enough, the chemistry really didn't change that much. That was really curious because we all assumed that temperature would have a big impact, but it didn't have as big an impact as we thought it would. But the one area that it consistently had an impact was on these hop creep enzymes, these enzymes that can break down dextrins and cause beer to re-ferment if you're dry hop beer with lots of yeast. But all of the reps showed that rep 2 was either the same as rep 1 or lower, in some cases consistently lower. And the time difference between rep 1 and rep 2 would be like a day to up to like a week. We're just trying to squeeze our trials in the midst of a commercial harvest. And so sometimes it's like, okay, we do rep 1 today, and tomorrow we do rep 2. And other times it's like, oh, we're changing, like that kiln you want to use, the smaller kiln is going to be used for something else. So we have to come back later. So that got us thinking maybe there's like a rep effect on this. There clearly was a rep effect, but maybe like a time effect on this hop enzyme. And so after presenting that to the HOC, and we would also have like one-on-ones with the hop growers who were participating in the study so they could get more detailed, like deep dive in the research. Jason was like, why don't we do like a little trial next year? We'll just do like our own little kind of harvest maturity study, and we'll look at hop enzymes. Oh, cool. That's great. And one of our former grads from our program, Ashley Hale, was like, she was in charge of this. So she would go out every week and pick a few strings of hops, run up to the picker, dry them. And then at the end of the season, boom, we got this package of like 6 or 7 samples of hops and looked at the enzyme activity. But since we had them, we're like, okay, let's look at other things. Let's look at the chemistry and let's like smell these, and kind of, it was like, why not? And we saw like a clear impact on the with time. And it was really striking. And so that like kind of lit up, and shared that back with Jason. And then it was like, okay, let's do this again next year, but let's like actually add more fields. And Jason has a number of growers that are pretty science minded or science understanding. Like they understand like a single field, single year, one-off is intriguing, but it's not really
Sort of trend.
defendable. Yeah. You need to like, at OSU and USDA, we do a lot of work with Jason and other growers like the Smiths at Loftus and Coleman Ag. And there's a whole long list of growers, but these are folks that are really interested in engaging with us. And I think because they do engage with scientists, they understand, okay, replication is important and having, multiple sites, whatnot. So Jason said, we'll pick 3 fields. So the study just grew by kind of a factor of 3, but Ashley was obliging. And then we just, okay, let's do that year after year. Like that one field that we did in 2020, we saw it again in 2021, and it looked really similar. And then we had, 2 other fields to go with that. And then we did that in 2022, and those 3 fields, and we did it in 2023. And it was really cool to see that. And at that point, we kind of like, this is a chunk. Let's just stop here from a data analysis perspective. The project is still continuing. We just had an email yesterday with Ashley, like, are we going to do 2025? And what we have done since 2022 is we've now kind of shifted to start, we added Simcoe. We wanted to kind of look at another variety. And then we started looking at virus-free versus virus-infected rootstock. So Jason and Yakima Chief Ranches have built this huge state-of-the-art propagation center where they do tissue culture propagating, and they can ensure that the material they're starting with when they propagate hops is virus free. There's viruses on all the hop fields, and the viruses get transmitted very easily through like the equipment, like when you crown a field or trim the top of crown, you can transmit viruses. And historically, the way propagation would work is that a farmer would just go out into the field and like either cut rhizomes, or they might do soft tissue propagation, but it's typically happening at a farm base, and there was no check on the quality of that, like the genetic purity of the material that's being propagated. So you could potentially be propagating off types that are mixed in, or the virus level. But once we started having access to like 100% certified virus-free rootstock, Jason said, man, when you just like go out in the field, the plants look different. He feels like they mature differently. And so what we got to was in 1 year, as we added a few more fields, one of the fields just looked weird. And we weren't sure what to do. We checked our data. The data looks fine. And so in one of these one-on-ones with Jason, we showed him the data, and he was like, that's really interesting. That odd field, that's a virus-free field. So we're like, ooh. So that was 2 years ago? And we're like, okay, we're going to pivot. We're going to take some of the existing Citra fields in the study out. I think some of them might even been pulled up because Jason was changing things over, and we shifted our attention to a design which is like looking at virus-free versus virus-infected. So in 2 years, we'll have another discussion, and we can talk about the results of that. I guess it's still early on.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's a long answer to your question, like how do we get this? So it kind of got started because we were doing kilning work. We were working with Jason, and Jason was intrigued by, like, we had enough data that we were scratching our head, like something seems like there's something here. And so that pilot year, that single field was enough to And for Jason, he gets value out of this. And it's kind of cool that he puts in a huge amount of in-kind contribution, like Ashley's time, the picking facilities, drying, all the stuff. And it's just like, then gives us the samples and we collect the data from that. So
yeah, and in terms of it is an area of interest. Our listeners might have had Range Brewing in Queensland. They did beer with a New Zealand's freestyle hop, Nelson Sauvon, a couple of weeks apart, I think, or maybe late March versus early April harvest. Hawker's beer in Melbourne has done it as well. So I drank all those beers.
Some
and they did.
Folks in Washington, CLS Farms has been doing this as well. So this understanding that late pick versus early pick are different.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of timely. It's sort of serendipity, that this Citra maturity study we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it is sort of timely because what we've seen is there's clearly is a difference in terms of maturity, in terms of the hop aroma expression. And kind of circling back briefly to the study, the biochemical stuff, we could see that change occurring every year. Like with hop maturity, hop enzymes that go down. But I think what was really interesting was then to look at the chemistry and the sensory, like the chemistry, watching that change. A lot of it looks similar to what we've seen before. Then there's some newer stuff because of different variety like Citra, but like this OG character, the onion garlic character, it's something that if here growers saying, late picked Mosaic or Citra can get pretty oniony, Strata can do that. And it was really interesting to see in the data, like, and to be like, on almost all my studies, I'm on the panel, so I can smell and I can relate to the data. Yeah. That was really interesting. I mean, even though everything's coming at you blind, you don't know everything's blind coded and randomized. There were samples that were just super oniony and other ones that were like very like bell peppery, vegetative. And then to look at the data and go, oh yeah, these early picked ones are clearly like, it's not just like we're changing intensity, we're like changing qualities.
It kind of that presentation and the fact that the flavor profile of that hop can change so dramatically,
exactly,
in just depending on the day that you pick it.
Exactly.
It's so amazing. It kind of brought home to me just how I guess delicate the hop plant is, and I don't know. It's really.
I don't know. Like, for me, I wouldn't necessarily call it delicate, but it's certainly dynamic.
Like
the picking window is it seems like really narrow, right? You go from this period where it's just it smells hoppy, it's kind of home, it's kind of green, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, it smells great, and then before you know it, you're, at least for a variety like Citra, you're into like, it smells great, but it smells pretty oniony, pretty garlicky, and it can move really deep into that.
Yeah, and is your hope, or it's probably more for the hop growers, but that you might say, well, this is the ideal window, or is it more the change is interesting and it's changed?
Yeah, that's
because
a really
some
good question.
brewers look for different.
Right. So HBC,
yeah.
the hop breeding company, they for Citra, they set the picking window. I'm not sure exactly how. I should talk to Jason about how we decided to do that. But HBC, for the study, and I mean, basically every year they say you can, in Washington, if you're growing HBC, or is it 369, whatever Citra is, you can't pick it earlier than September 6th, and you can't pick it later than September 15th. So they dictate a 9-day window.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, there are instances where people pick outside that window, like a machine breaks down, or you get a lot of rain, you can't get in the field, or there are these things that get in the way, and you have to get the hops out of the field. Or maybe there's disease pressure, you can see it coming, so let's pick it a little bit earlier. But generally, it's this tight window. So that part isn't moving, but what I'm hoping is that people understand that it is your response. Hops seem delicate, or it seems really dynamic. And what would be interesting to do in the future is, rather than doing this at week at apart, when you get in the window, maybe almost do it daily and kind of see how fast is that change occurring. That's kind of a scientific curiosity, but that would just take a lot of resources in the middle of the busiest time of the hop growing.
Yeah.
But it's right now it's sort of observational, but I think the data can be used in a lot of different areas. One is this understanding that for a variety like Citra, the difference between early pick and late pick can be pretty dramatic. And there certainly are a lot of growers. We've done some work earlier on, like Daniel Sharp's work and also Scott LaFontaine's work, that kind of points to later picked hop varieties having distinctly different characters than early. And so then brewers might be like, oh, I want only early picked, or I want only late picked. Well, the early picked, I think, is a little bit easier proposition. The late picked, once it starts getting late and it gets later and later, you run into these problems. Okay, now the hop can go really OG for a variety like Citra. Not all varieties will do that. And then you start running into pickability issues, and you could run into weather issues depending upon where you are, where this is grown. In Oregon, it could be an issue. So it helps, I think, temper the brewer's maybe expectation or perception that I'm just going to demand late pick, to understand that it's sensitive and that there's only so far you can go before it can be really stinky. Well, I call it stinky. Some brewers brewers like that. Some brewers want dankness, cannabis quality out of their.
That's what I love in an IPA.
Yeah, and so not that late pick necessarily moves you into dank, but there are some aromas that are kind of evocative of dankness. But once it gets to really garlicky, okay, now that's just garlic. It's not weed anymore. It's more garlic.
Yeah, I do wonder if you could, there's the option for blending as well, that you might want late and early harvest, because your core range IPA needs to take a certain way. So you might be able to sort of build your beer around multiple, give it more dimensions, I think, from a single hop variety.
Yeah, you can play both sides of that coin. You can have it's either more dimensionality. It gives you more options to create different products from the same hop. It also, the flip side is that it helps you understand that if you're going to try to create uniformity, that there are different features that are going to come up, and as you point out, you could create blends that would help you target that you're not just at the whim of whatever sample comes across the selection table. That you could know that, okay, if we tend to like the more OG character, well then we're looking for a later picked for that particular farm than the early picked stuff.
Great. Tom, we might just take a quick break. Cheers. Welcome to our Have You Done a Railing segment.
Yeah, time to celebrate some more good beer citizens around Australia. Thanks to our partners at Railings for helping us put this together. We've been through the nominations we've had from, I guess, people around the beer industry, members of the public. However, we're looking to do something a little bit different this week to kick it off. with an honourable mention for
Yes.
Scott Smith at Super Signs. As a lot of people will be aware, Gabs kicks off early this year in Melbourne this weekend. We're running our Crafty Crawl sort of festival edition there again, where punters can sign up and try and find some. Well,
It's kind of a treasure
map.
hunt, isn't
treasure,
it? Yeah.
Treasure map around the place, and if they find all the signs and complete their treasure map, they go into a competition to win a whole bunch of beer and merch and stuff.
Yeah.
We wanted some signs doing, as usual, relatively last minute. And Scott at Super Signs stepped up to the plate.
And said, no worries, we'll get them done. And also Cal, co-founder of Kaiju, he's actually picking them up for us and taking them to Gabs. So
Oh, well,
yeah.
Super have done them and without charge.
Yeah.
We just love what you guys at Crafty
Yeah.
can do. So yeah, huge thanks to the guys at Super Signs. If you are going to Gabs this weekend, keep an eye out for the big signs with the QR codes on, and they'll be on 6 of the breweries around the festival. There's huge prizes to be won from each session. You'll see Will there potentially on Friday. I'll be there
Yes.
Saturday wandering around with my mum and dad in tow. Should be interesting. And that brings us to this month's winner of Have You Done a Rallings, which has been nominated by Keith Ashley from Running with Thieves in Frio. And Keith has nominated Steve Biscoe from Beer Drawing Services.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really a heartfelt one. Keith says that Steve's an incredible guy, he runs an incredible business, and he did go through a life-altering motorbike crash. And at the moment, he's trying to raise money for another local hero, Des Gray from Supergas, who's facing his own health challenges. So, yeah, it's really good to see that this sense of community rallying around each other, people looking after each other's health as well. It's really important. But
Well,
Keith,
Keith goes on to say that, Des from Supergas will help anyone in WA at any time and is struggling at the moment. Steve has talked to the WA Hospo community to raise money for Des, and as Keith signs off, Steve is the dictionary definition of a good beer citizen. So thanks for the nomination, Keith. Congratulations to Steve. Best of luck with the fundraising, and wishing Des well with his health challenges. If you'd like to nominate a good beer citizen, we're always looking for more nominations. It's it's good to put it out there, all the good stuff that's happening around the beer industry. So you can nominate those at craftypint.com/rallings, which is RALLINGS. And we'll be back with more of them in a few weeks' time.
and on with the show. Cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome back. Tom, what about location and terroir and hop growing? It's a similar thing to some of those beers I mentioned before with the late and early harvest. I have had some where brewers really push that the hops were grown on different farms and in the same part of America, same variety, that they often taste different to me. I kind of do buy into it a fair bit. Like, what's going on there, or do you think that's really important as well?
We've done several years of work on regional identity or terroir. And our work got started with interest from Coleman Ag. They're the largest hop grower in Oregon, and they had a field of Simcoe, I believe it was. We did terroir studies with Simcoe and with Mosaic and Cascade, but those two, I think it was a Simcoe field, and like brewers would come back year after year, and then like with the blind evaluation of like at selection, would routinely pick out this one field and say, I want that. There's something that they really liked about this field, and they were like, what's going on? Like is there a there in terms of why this field is perceived as being different than others, or is it just like coincidence? And there's other examples where brewers would have different perspectives on the expression of hop aroma of a particular variety based upon where it's grown, like Yakima grown, whatever, Cascade versus Oregon grown Cascade. So I think there's enough anecdotal stuff out there that like place matters. So anyway, that Coleman Ag inquiry, like Liz Coleman called me up and said, do you think there's like a there? Like, let's find out. So we started a small regional identity study that grew into a larger one the next year, which then like 2 years later, I think a year or 2 years later, grew into a really big one where we had 25 different growers, I think. And we had 40 samples of hops coming from of Cascade and Mosaic, and it was like maybe it was 20 and 20, right? So 10 different locations of different farms of Cascade and Yakima Valley, and similarly 10 and Willamette Valley. We did it for Cascade and Mosaic. And with that, we're doing like soil measurements at the site where these particular fields that we're grabbing samples from, and collecting weather data and agronomic data, spraying records, irrigation, all kinds of stuff to try to understand what's happening. And then we look at the data from a chemistry and sensory perspective. And what we saw were pretty distinct differences between Willamette Valley and Yakima Valley, which is like not surprising. But what we also found were that there are pretty broad differences within each of these valleys. Like there's as much variation of the hop chemistry and hop aroma within the Willamette Valley and within the Yakima Valley as there is between the two valleys. So it's not like, I'm holding my hands up now, but like, it's two clouds. The clouds are not like overlapping. They're kind of distinct, but they're not like two distinct little blobs of point that are clearly separated. The distance between these two is like the same as the distance within these two groups. So that was kind of interesting to see. So I would agree that place has an importance. I think it's more nuanced than the maturity stuff that we talked about. I think like hop maturity has a bigger impact on the aromatic qualities that you'd find in a hop than the location difference. And one of the challenges with any terroir-based trial is that you have maturity overlaid on it.
Yeah,
right.
Of
So
course, yeah.
it's hard to, since they're being done at commercial scale. Well, not at commercial scale. They're being done in commercial yards. We're taking small samples that we then harvest ourselves, dry ourselves to try to control that part. But nonetheless, we got to get the hop before the grower harvests that field. And the grower is going to harvest that field based upon his or her decisions as to when they want to harvest. So we feel like, okay, it's within the picking range, but as we just talked about, like that picking window could have pretty distinct differences. That's like one of the things that's always in the back of my mind, like, okay, to what degree do we have differences in maturity? There's not a uniform maturity index. That's one of the challenges. Like every grower has a different set of criteria they use to determine when to pick. A common one that people use is dry matter. And so we measure dry matter, like in this terroir study, and we don't see significant differences in dry matter between like the two locations. So that at least tells us, okay, at least it's not like all the Yakima samples were statistically at a different dry matter than the Oregon ones. And then you could just say, aha, okay, maybe maturity is the deal. But nonetheless, we don't know to the degree what that occurs. And so when you have a beer made, I like the beers that are coming from single variety, single farm. Those are really quite cool. We see that in Oregon. Like there's a brewery in town that will have like Citra grown at Coleman Ag, and then Citra grown at, Perwalt Farms or wherever. There's different farms. They're kind of neat to have those laid out. And oftentimes what we see, not oftentimes, the times I've seen it have not been like a competition. It's more like we're featuring a all Coleman Ag hop beer and maybe an all Crosby Hop Farm hop beer, but not necessarily same harvest year, same variety, as if, a comparison. It's great storytelling, and particularly for Oregonians, like you're within short driving distance where all the hops are grown, so it feels very local. But from the standpoint of, like, if someone were to give you two beers and say, okay, this is the same harvest year, same variety, can you tell which one was grown in Oregon, which one's grown in Yakima?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that people are kind of curious, like, okay, what is the overriding characteristics from each of these locations? And we don't have enough years to do it. You'd probably need to do the trial for like a minimum of 5 years, ideally like 10 years, to know if year after year these regions had a similar kind of expression that was statistically different than another region. The fact that we're seeing differences within these these two regions and across those regions is interesting, but maybe not surprising because of things we talked about. What would be really interesting is like if year after year after year you see like this particular field at Coleman Ag, year after year after year, people come back to that and they're trying to figure out why. What is it about that and how is it described? So we haven't done enough work to really answer that question because it's expensive and complicated work to do, and just haven't found the money and interest to do it. I think some growers are really keen on terroir stuff. I think it helps them in terms of differentiation. It helps them in terms of connecting with the brewer. But there's other growers that don't like it at all because they view it as like winners and losers as opposed to differences, which I mean, I suppose I could see that, but for me, it's
especially when so many other factors are involved.
Yeah,
But
it's just like music. Like, okay, you can describe like different artists create different sounds. Doesn't necessarily mean one is better than the other. It's just like, what kind of music do you like? And that's why I think the whole regional identity part I feel like it offers growers more storytelling, more benefits about like what's unique about their operation than it does the concern of somehow their location is going to be considered bad or less desirable. But I'm not a grower and brewing scientist, so I'm not running a business of selling hops. So I suppose I can understand the fear, but I think the fear is unwarranted.
Yeah, it just makes life harder and harder for the hop grower potentially, doesn't it? They really have to silo things to that degree.
Exactly,
But
I think the other thing with like terroir is that it's different than in wine grapes because hops are just like a portion of the ingredient composition. And I would say most brewers are not making single hop variety beers. Right? They're using a particular hop variety in combination with others. In fact, I think it creates a more interesting and complex beer when you do that as opposed to just a single hop variety. So it's like, we can show there's a terroir difference, but in the end, does it like ultimately really matter if like you're going to blend some Citra grown in Oregon with some, I don't know, Cascade grown in Washington and some Mosaic grown in Idaho to create this really hop forward beer? Are you going to be able to really see these differences? Maybe, but I think it's hard. You have all these other factors.
The amount of beers you drink that has hops from 4 continents potentially.
Yeah, exactly.
4 countries, 3 continents, or something like that.
Can totally happen. Yeah, exactly. You got New Zealand hop and an American hop mixed with and a German hop. So
it's exciting. It still feels like there's still so much to learn about hops, and we're
that's
kind
the
of
cool thing that it's
you see new products coming out from the hop suppliers all the time, the liquid, the cryo, and all the different variants and so on.
It's not like everything old is new again.
No,
it's like this is new stuff, right?
We haven't scratched the surface yet.
Exactly.
So
like the current thing, like on thiols, it's like that's been really interesting to see explode. Like these are compounds that we could smell, but we couldn't detect until, or at least detect very easily until relatively recently. And then we're like, oh, there's this whole non-terpene fraction. Like for years, we've been focusing just on terpenes. It's interesting, like the cannabis industry is like, terpenes. I'm like, okay. But there are other things in hop oil and hemp oil or cannabis oil or aromatic fraction that are important to aroma that are not terpene derived. So that's kind of fun. There's new space, and from a scientist, that's like, it's fun, right? It's hard work to go back into a field that has been heavily plowed and plow it some more to find something new, or maybe that's not the right metaphor, but it's like to dig through something. You see these guys out on the beach with like the metal detectors, like these old guys after a weekend looking for watches or whatever. It's nice when that field is like hasn't been touched. It's like, oh man, look at what's here, and you can. It's the questions, I don't know, just seem obvious and easier as opposed to going back through and trying to extract more information out of something that has been heavily researched. I think scientists in general like to find these sort of greenfield spaces.
New ground to
new
till.
Ground.
This is
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Tom, and what about, you told us you were on holidays, but I can't help but notice your holidays correspond perfectly with the hop harvest in New Zealand.
Exactly,
and in Australia, and you've mostly been in New Zealand.
Yeah,
for
so
the
right
last
now I'm
little while.
on a sabbatical leave, and so a sabbatical is kind of an interesting thing that is pretty unique. Like academic sabbaticals are anywhere from 6 months to 12 months. I mean, I've heard of other people taking sabbaticals, but they're often like a few weeks or a month. So the idea with sabbatical is that you can step away from like the day-to-day stuff that you do, and you could do almost anything. But I think most of my colleagues kind of like study something new, or so for me, I did one in 2008 and 9 in Berlin. That was pretty transformative on my view of beer and my connection in that and the international brewing scene, to like really understand European beer, really understand German beer, and understand the science that goes on there, the training. So this year I'm in New Zealand for 4 months. Landed there like December 30th. And the idea is I'm spending the time connecting with the New Zealand hop industry. So I'm living just outside of Motueka, between Motueka and Nelson. So this is in the north part of the South Island, really close to where a lot of the hop growing is occurring, and really close to where the New Zealand hop breeding energy is. And so it's a time to like make new connections, new professional connections, and also new friendships, and understand like how does the New Zealand hop industry work? Because I had really no idea, in part because I'm a brewing scientist, not a brewer. I'm not buying hops. I kind of sit on the sidelines and watch what goes on in the brewing community. So it's really interesting to understand like the New Zealand hop industry is very different than the U.S. industry and different than the Australian industry. So I'm getting to understand geographically where hops are grown, like agronomically, how are they grown, and starting next week, like how are they picked and processed? What's the relationship like within the hop industry? It's pretty dynamic within the New Zealand industry right now, going from historically a single co-op to now a co-op with some individual growers. And
feels like there's a bit of an arms race as well. There's a lot of new products coming out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's grown tremendously. And one of the challenges right now is that there's like this huge glut of hops. So, and that's a challenge not just for the Kiwis, it's a challenge for the entire global hop industry. As you have all this hop in inventory, and there's new varieties coming on the market, and there's this balance of like growers needing to make a living, and they got all this infrastructure and all this hops growing, but there's not as much demand. So interesting to see how the industry responds to that. Yeah, so it's time spent in New Zealand understanding what the hop industry is like, and of course the New Zealand brewing industry. It's very different than the U.S. brewing industry, so those are cool things. Visiting universities as well, understanding how the academic institutions work, how their relationships connect to the industry. So it's a nice opportunity to kind of understand all that. And like, as a northern hemisphere person, to spend February in short pants.
Yeah.
It's just like so awesome. Like mid-February. February is like the month that our family hates the most in the Northwest. It's just dreary, dark, rainy. It's cold. It's just damp, right? It's not. It's much, there's colder spots in North America than Oregon, at least in the Willamette Valley. But it's pretty damp, and so to be like have it just be intensely sunny.
Yeah.
In New Zealand.
You enjoyed
in February.
An Antipodean Christmas?
A summer Christmas.
Summer Christmas?
We arrived after Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were there right before New Year's. Yeah, but we still. It was really interesting to go to people's houses, and it's like they're in shorts. It's bright sunny, and in the corner is a Christmas tree, and it's like, this seems having a barbecue. Yeah, so it's been really cool, and then just to understand. I think when I travel, you really understand the place, like just the geographical location until you're actually in a car driving. You don't really understand like how far away like Adelaide is from Melbourne. On a map, you're like, oh, okay, they're kind of close to each other, when in fact they're not really close at all.
And there's a whole lot of nothing in between.
Right? Exactly. And I haven't done that drive, but like in New Zealand, it's kind of just the opposite. It's like 30 kilometers, and you're in a different part of the country.
Yeah.
Whereas we go to the States, and I still remember the first time flying in over Los Angeles and thinking, that's the entire population of my country right below.
Right there, exactly. Yes, you're flying over. Right. Yeah. So it's been a great experience, and I firmly believe that when you reside someplace for a while, you really get to understand it at a deeper level. You understand its culture, you understand its people, start making these lifelong friendships that kind of connect you to that place, as opposed to a week stay. Like I'm kind of I'm at a conference here in Tasmania. We came a little bit early, and we're going to leave a little bit later so we can explore. But there's plenty of people that have flown in on Sunday, going to be here for the conference, going to fly out on Friday. And if they've never been to Tasmania before, their view of Tasmania is just like
This
downtown
hotel.
Hobart, and this hotel. I'm like, oh, it's so unfortunate because Tasmania is such a cool part of Australia. Amazing.
We'll have to wrap up soon, Tom, but I was just thinking, do you have a favorite hop?
Oh, no, I don't.
Asking if he's got a
Thought you were going to say
favourite
Citra.
No, I don't. I've done a lot of work with Cascade.
Is it easier to ask if you have a favorite child?
Yeah, right. What's your favorite beer? Exactly. No. I think that like the beer answer, I've got like a portfolio, right, of different beer styles that I like depending upon occasion. Kind of same thing with hops. I'm intrigued with Citra. I like Citra and Mosaic. I like Cascade. Do a lot of work with Cascade. I think it makes great beer. I also like German hop varieties. I mean, that experience living in Berlin for a year and really doing a deep dive in German yellow beer. Whoa, man.
Really opens your mind, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Exactly. And those hops and those work so well together. And like, it's, you can make an interesting Pilsner style beer with Kiwi hops, but it's a totally different
They've been
right?
growing them for a long time. They've
exactly.
got it right.
Yeah. So it's its own thing. It's not like what I think we were talking before we got on, like a New Zealand Saaz, or there was like breeders for many years, like from the 50s to the 80s, were often in other countries trying to develop hops that were like replacement varieties for German varieties, and that's probably because of the state of the time. Like the brewers were all making yellow lager beer, and now we're kind of like, we have that, but we have the ability to make beers, or an interest to make beers that are expressive of all different kinds of aromas. And so rather than trying to hunt for replacement varieties, all the breeders now can look for unique things that are New Zealand or Australian based or North American based, which I think would be so much funner for a hop breeder. And we're not trying to replicate a Czech Pils with Australian hops. We can make like an Australian Pils.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I really enjoyed my first shell hammering.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It's been great. Highly recommend it to first timers.
Exactly.
Cheers.
Yeah.
The Crafty Pint podcast is produced and edited by Matt Hoffman. You can get all your beer-related news and reviews on the Crafty Pint website, craftypint.com, and can stay up to date on future podcast episodes via our socials.
We wouldn't be able to produce the podcast or the website, events or festivals we run without the support of the beer industry, whether that's suppliers, bars, breweries or bottle shops. If you'd like to support the show or partner with the Crafty Pint in other ways, please reach out to Craig via the details in the show notes.
And if you're a beer lover who'd like to support what we do, you can join our exclusive club for beer lovers, the Crafty Cabal. Visit craftykabal.com for more.
And until next time, drink good beer.